Here. All right. Hey, everybody. Happy Saturday morning. I know it's early. I know. But welcome to another episode of Cafe BTW, a morning coffee gaming podcast. I'm here to hit you with some general gaming news, a lot of retrospective stuff. And as you see below, I have a great friend down below that I've met in a couple of interesting places, which we're going to jump into because we're dealing with community today and the culture community. I have Sam Houston down below. What's up, man? He does a lot of stuff in the VR space, but I'll let him introduce himself. Sam, thanks for joining me this
Sure.
early morning. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Hey everyone, I'm Sam. I'm a community manager by background, so that's my career for the last 12 years. Started working in video games about 12 years ago. I worked at EA about 10 years ago, even worked at Origin, which is kind of cool or
Really? So,
interesting. Yeah, now to see
oh,
it.
wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
I worked at Origin like right around, not when it launched, but like a little bit after that. And
That's
then,
funny.
yeah, for the last, let's say 4 months, 4.5 months, I've been working at AltSpace VR. So I've been doing community in a virtual reality community, which has been really interesting considering that I started working there right when the coronavirus just started kind of popping off. So it was kind of an interesting time just to be thrown in the deep end into VR.
Were you like in an office and then immediately not in an office because of that, or were you already working remote in this type of job?
I personally was already at home. I was actually looking for a job, so I was already at home. But yeah, just kind of, I don't know, one of those things where a buddy calls you up and says, "Hey man, I heard you need a gig or whatever. Are you interested in this VR thing that I'm doing?" And within a couple weeks, I started working with them. And because at the time my friend had was hired by them to do some events in alt space.
Which they do
And
tons of events. I've seen some like
yeah,
interesting, like the celebrity Jackbox event and stuff like that. I saw a bunch of stuff like that.
so we were hosting events and kind of testing things out in the spring, I guess late spring. And then shortly after I started helping out on the community side of things for alt space.
That's cool. And then, obviously, I currently do more community focused stuff. I have like an entertainment background, but I'm the community director for Stamp to Cancer, which is basically, working with streamers, influencers, even publishers in raising awareness and raising funds for cancer research. But in that sense, I've created essentially a community that has joined together called the SU2C Stream Team. So what I do is I curate a community with people, with a Discord, and we'll get into that. But I think that this is really cool that you and I, who both kind of touch in the community fields in a living, and also as
Mhm.
probably gamers, because I'm assuming, Sam, you yourself have been parts of communities, just general gaming
Totally.
communities. Um, so I do want to ask you: are you usually a guy that keeps your finger on the pulse with what's going on out there in the gaming world when it comes to news and stuff like that? Because before we kick into the general topic, which everyone, thanks for showing up, Stash, Biff, Fred. We're gonna just jump into a couple of crazy things that happened this week, and I wanted to just jump into one thing that I just need to talk about before we get into community stuff, and it's the Apple Fortnite war
Oh
that's
yeah,
going on
man.
right now. Um,
Yeah.
which I think is really interesting in the sense that, I didn't realize that the App Store takes almost 30% of your revenue from the app. And that means any V-Bucks purchased through the App Store were 30% of that is taken away, which would
Right.
accumulate a 300 and look at this, $360 million Apple made off of Fortnite
Yeah.
alone just for having their platform on their system. Sam, what
Yeah,
is it?
totally.
What's your thought of Fortnite saying, you know what, we're gonna put our foot down. We're gonna, Apple's like, we're ripping you off the store and we're gonna sue you, says Epic Games. So, what's your thought on this, like, kind of game? This video game is fighting Apple right now.
Yeah, it's really interesting because yeah, it's happening with Apple, Google. Play also took them off
That's
the Google
right.
Play Store
That's right. It's like Google versus
shortly
Apple.
thereafter. Yeah. Well, they're both versus Epic,
I mean, I'm sorry.
and
I'm Epic
yeah,
versus Apple versus Google or Google.
yeah,
It's a triple threat ladder
yeah,
match or
yeah,
whatever it
exactly.
might be. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. I think there's been some great articles. I read one last night from IGN, kind of pointing out the hypocrisy of it, because these same sort of walled garden approaches to creating a platform. And what I mean by walled garden, if you're not familiar with that phrase,
I'm
it
not.
basically means it's your kind of playground, and you make the rules and you enforce them, and anything that's not kind of within those rules is not allowed on those platforms, right? So again, an example of that is the iTunes or the App Store. You've got the Google Play Store, and then what these articles are pointing out in terms of hypocrisy is those same sorts of dynamics exist on the PlayStation and the Xbox, and
Sure.
Epic isn't suing them over those yet, because I'm sure
Ooh, good point.
Microsoft and Sony take a percentage as well. I don't know if what percentage it is, if it
But
if it's as high as 30%.
would you say a 5 to 10% cut is reasonable? And maybe that's why that might be the cut. We just don't know. But a 30% cut of
Right.
is a little extreme, honestly.
Yeah, it
Um,
is. It's pretty high. Yeah, I mean, I know Epic is. I think their rev share is like 10%. I think is what they're doing on the Epic Games Store.
okay.
Um,
Which is
yeah,
very low, very low. What
relative to these others. Yeah,
relative. I
yeah,
mean, they're still making lots of money off of 5% of sales on video games, but
yeah, yeah. Like General So Chicken is saying
says 30.
30% might be standard across. Yeah, so I think um, I I'm glad that people are having these discussions. I have an app that I run on my own. I run a cannabis social network,
What's it
and
called?
it's called Cannabuzz, Canna Buzz.
I'm a
And
supporter
so
of the cannabis community, by the way.
cool, awesome.
Is
So
this it
yeah,
right here?
we
It has like a funny sunglasses with like hair coming
yeah
out. Oh, cool,
yeah
dude. You run. Oh, that's cool. Tell me about that.
yeah. So we've actually had issues, or I'm dealing with issues with the App Store as well. And I guess to kind of take it back to your original question,
Yeah.
and kind of what are my thoughts on it. I think I'm glad that someone's speaking up, because it is really frustrating to create an app and try to kind of play by whatever rules and whatever, frankly, arbitrary rules that they come up with. So, for example, on the Apple App Store, we recently on Cannabis got our update to the app rejected a couple times, because we have a login with Facebook button, and Apple's new rule is that if you have that, you also have to have a sign in with Apple button. And so basically, we can't update our app anymore until we add sign in with Apple, or we have to remove sign in with Facebook. So it's,
That's interesting.
yeah, so they're using their ability, like their leverage as the platform holder, to kind of force you into using things like forcing their Apple sign in and stuff like that. And from their point of view, I'm sure they will have some sort of justification saying, oh, this is safer, we trust our Apple login much more than other
Yeah.
third party logins or whatever. But the end result is they're just making sort of relatively arbitrary decisions that are based on their own business needs and not on their customers or their platform customers needs. And so they're basically forcing us to put in more work. We the development team that works on the app has to go do that now, and that's time and money that they weren't planning to do, just because Apple has now decided if you want to have an app on the Apple App Store, you have to have a sign in with Apple button. If you have some other sign-ins. So that's just one small example where
Interesting.
they present these hoops that you have to jump through, and it's super frustrating. So yeah, I'm glad that there's more scrutiny and people pushing back against these platform holders and these marketplace companies. Um, Generally speaking, I think the marketplace company, if you look at marketplaces, whether it's you the App Store or Amazon or other places, these marketplaces have gotten so huge, and the people that run them are using their powers in weird ways. You know, whether with Amazon, I think it's weird that they'll see what's selling really well, and then all of a sudden they'll start making versions of that as well. You know, so there's examples of people that have made all kinds of stuff, whether it's like slippers or suitcases or whatever, where all of a sudden Amazon's own version of that product shows up at the top of search. And so it may seem to maybe a gamer that these are all kind of like separate issues, but they are kind of all playing around in the same arena of big corporations creating marketplaces where they then have extreme power, and then they're utilizing their or like leveraging the power that they have over those marketplaces to affect other people's businesses.
Yeah.
And that's what sucks, is like you can't have an app on the Apple or on an iPhone, you know, without the App Store or on Google. And yes, there's like side loading and blah blah blah, but it's not it's not the same. And so it just it's kind of a weird world that we're living with these giant companies kind of being able to control entire economies, basically.
So and those are great perspectives, Sam. Thank you so much. Really great insight. And one thing that I was showing in the background when you were talking is the
Oh
commercial
yeah.
that Epic Game made to mock the 1984 commercial they released for the Macintosh, where and when I saw this, Sam, it meant to me that Epic was planning this. Okay,
Oh, totally.
they didn't just make this like yesterday. They made this
Right.
over the course of like a couple of months probably, and said we're gonna release this. It's gonna be a statement.
Totally.
It's a total statement to say you are no longer gonna just tear us apart and take all this revenue when we're putting in all the work and we're utilizing your platform, which I agree there should still be a slight percentage that goes to the platform you're on. But I thought this was incredible. And not only that, we're going to see a statement, literally. Epic Games has defied the App Store monopoly. In retaliation, Apple is blocking Fortnite from 1 billion devices. Join the fight to stop 2020 from becoming 1984. First of all, 2020 just doesn't stop with stuff. The fact that a video game is putting Google and Apple up against the wall and saying you guys can't do this anymore, I'm like, I can't believe it. What's next? Let me check so it looks like Biff downloaded your app, by the way.
Thanks, man.
I do want to go back to what Secret Stash said. He's talking about centralization with cryptocurrency, and that platforms should be decentralized, and yada yada yada. Yeah, you're right. But unfortunately, and me personally, because I used to have a cryptocurrency podcast, I don't know if I told you that, Sam, but I did a podcast called The Coin Boys for about 4 years. Unfortunately, Stash, you are correct in nature, but the reality of that happening anytime soon is very slim to none. I'm sorry. Unfortunately, decentralized platforms are still a long ways to go. Although there are existing ones in the mainstream, it's unfortunate. 5 to 10 years, maybe. But, even with the lockdown and the fact that people don't want to use cash as much anymore, hasn't, in my opinion, got people thinking, oh, let's start using crypto on a mainstream level. Unfortunately, it hasn't. It's had people think more about tapless purchasing with their iPhones than going to use. So it's like turning current credit cards into tapless features. It's still not crypto. It's still not decentralized. That being said, I think this is important, and there are things that connect. And there's just a couple more things I want to talk about before we get into our main topic, Sam, and that's
Sure.
Shroud and Dr. Disrespect come back to streaming, right?
Totally.
Now, we saw Dr. Disrespect come back to YouTube, and I was blown away. First of all, the guy is one of the most entertaining streamers out there. There's no one like Dr. Disrespect, and the kind of the quality and production value he does, even if you don't like his stuff, is outstanding. He plays credits at the end of his stream like it's a movie, okay? That's how good Dr. Disrespect is. But what's really great is Shroud, who was one of the people that left Twitch originally for a big contract and then got then left Mixer and got paid about $10 million to get out of his contract, goes back to Twitch this week, gets over, and I have the stats here, gets over 516, he peaks at 516,000 viewers, okay? The rumor is that he almost probably made about $90,000 on just subscriptions alone on his return stream. And why am I bringing this up? Because not only is the power of a video game shutting down, or potentially not shutting down, but fighting a big app company, we have streamers blowing people out of the water. For instance, like this is better ratings than a really good cable show at times. The fact, Sam, what does it mean to you, and what do you see that the fact that there's one person generating this type of viewership, and don't forget, this is attached to his community that we're going to get into. So wanted to ask your opinion on that.
Yeah, I think it's really exciting. I saw Dr. Disrespect streaming on YouTube the other day, his stream back, and I made a comment to my wife, because of course we're both at home right now. And I made a comment. I was like, holy cow, he's got 500,000 viewers. That's huge. And I was trying to explain it to her. And I think I did a tweet about this too, where even just a couple of years ago, those sorts of numbers would just be tournaments. And even now it's pretty much just tournaments and things like that. It's not often that streamers, just singular streamers, are pulling in 500,000 viewers. So
No.
It's really impressive. I watch Overwatch League, and Overwatch League only gets like 100,000 to like 30,000 viewers.
And that's
maybe
a
a little bit more.
League.
Yeah.
That's an entire league with production people behind it, with
Totally.
employees. Yet here's one person. Literally, it's unbelievable what these kids are making. I am blown away these days, especially since COVID has locked us in a little bit.
Yeah.
The gaming medium, believe it or not, it's on a path, and it's on a path of both destruction and positive growth. And I'm sorry, but I think that there's actually, there is a negative side to it, but there is a great positive side to it. And I do like how Epic Games is putting their foot down. And I do like to see people like Doc back. Listen, I did say we may never know what happened to him in Twitch, but here's the bottom line. If he did something completely illegal, the FBI would have raided him already. He would have been arrested. We would have known something, right? Or Twitch didn't press charges on something. But look, bottom line is they both sign NDAs. My opinion is that he might know something about what happened. It's just no one's talking, and they don't have to. They're moving on, and I think it's better. Whatever. Let Doc stream and let Twitch do their thing and just move on. They're never going to be together again. But that being said, and I think what segues into our main topic today, Sam, is about community growth, the culture of community is kind of a broad spectrum. So I was looking up some interesting things, and I wanted to go through with you and see if you agree. I found a random article in Positive Psychology about what are the 10 most positive traits you should have in your community, right? We're going to kick it off with this. Work together toward a common goal. That's number one. Would you agree, Sam, that is an important trait to have in any type of community, especially a gaming community?
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of people ask you, or you get asked like, what is a community? And that is kind of a central part, is people are usually collectively interested and passionate about a specific thing or a goal or whatever.
Yeah. So and I think even if you're in like a video games community, your common goal is just to grow with the game and build the community out and make it stronger. So even if you're one person in that community, you're still affecting the community. Stash says, a troll on my last stream told me I was stupid for wearing a costume while streaming. I was like, clearly you are not Dr. Disrespect fan. Yeah, no, Stash, don't listen to the trolls anyway. Keep doing what you can do. Believe it or not, what Dr. Disrespect does is really cool. He's acting. He's literally like acting on stream, and wear wigs as much as you'd like. Number 2, Sam, allow for freedom of expression. Very important one. Now, I think that has a little bit of I think number 4, which is set clear policies and obligations. Do you think you have complete freedom in communities? I don't know if that's completely true. I don't know. What do you think?
Sure. Yeah, I think you're kind of setting it up correctly in the sense that it's freedom within boundaries, I guess. And
Yeah.
so, uh, yeah, the way I kind of tend to describe it to people is like there are social norms and just rules to any sort of like, I don't know, communal gathering. Like an example is like you go to a party, right? And if you were to go into like a raging college party or whatever, that's going to be different than a like drinking wine and talking about a book party or whatever. There's totally different expectations of behavior. And so if you were going to get like drunk off your ass and go to that book party, people might be like, what the hell is this dude over here like who can barely stand? There's different expectations. And so it's the same thing with communities. You need to set expectations with people and have rules so that people understand how they should act. And part of that is reinforced by the community itself, right?
Right.
Communities can be self-corrective, and also people see how other people are acting and they kind of mirror that, right? So
Right.
that's kind of what that's one of the reasons why you want to try, like if you have a really trolly community or like people kind of just um are negative or whatever, it can kind of reinforce itself because people see that behavior and they just think, oh, this is how people act here. So you have to kind of disrupt those cycles to try
Yeah.
to get a more positive community.
Yeah, and and number three is promote fairness, which is
Right.
obviously something all communities should do. We talked about set clear policies and guidelines, which kind of connects back to two, allow for freedom of expression to a certain extent with the policy and guidelines of the community. You can't just be willy-nilly with things that aren't related to the community. Reddit's a good example of self-promoting is kind of a no-no. Even though sometimes there are subreddits that want you to promote, but for the
Right.
most part they don't want you self-promoting in a community that you're just supposed to be adding on to. If you're self-promoting, there's like a selfishness to that. And I agree with some subreddits on Reddit that might be true. Number five, maintain sensitivity towards members, of course. I mean, you have, especially as a community leader, an admin, a mod, you have to have sensitivity towards all members, and that includes the members themselves have to have sensitivity to each other. Number six, celebrate community heritage. I think that, if you're in a World of Warcraft community that's been around for 10 years, I think that stands, right? You're celebrating the anniversary. Hey, we made it to 11 years of this. It's kind of like a badge on Steam, right? You've been on Steam for 9 years. You've been on Imager for this long, whatever. What do you think of
Right.
celebrating a community's heritage? What does that mean to you?
um that's an interesting question. Yeah, I think it's good to acknowledge and kind of celebrate the contributions of past and kind of current members. Like, so for example, with Altspace, Altspace has been around for 4 or 5 years. So there are folks that I interact with on Altspace that have been literally been doing this for years. And then there's others that have just joined a couple months ago or maybe just yesterday or whatever the situation is. So it's a balancing act, and that you do want to kind of honor and make sure that you respect like where you've come from, but also kind of encourage folks to keep moving forward. So yeah, and then there's the whole nother issue, or not an issue, but a whole nother like element here is kind of what people call rituals in communities. So
Hmm.
like I learned about, or one of the I went to a talk that someone gave that kind of crystallized this in my mind, and it was someone who worked at Lyft at the time. And when Lyft launched, you would give them a fist bump. You would give the driver a fist bump when you first got in, and that was part of their like ritual
Their
as a
culture,
Lyft.
right?
Yeah, as a Lyft community, they, in my opinion, kind of unfortunately left that aside as they tried to kind of go after Uber and become as big as they can. But in the beginning, at least, that's how they differentiated themselves. I lived in San Francisco at the time, so we were kind of in the epicenter of these car companies trying to fight each other. And on one side, you had Uber, which is just kind of the typical Uber experience, not really much of an experience. You're just getting in a car, and obviously there's the experience of using the app and so on and so forth. But with Lyft, there was like you gave the fist bump, and in San Francisco there were even like themed Lyft cars. I remember I got in one that was like Bob Marley themed or whatever, and there were people there was disco Lyft, and there was like retro game Lyft. This guy who just like had all kinds of, you know, like Nintendo 64 and all this kind of stuff in his car. So those were like some rituals and things that people did to set themselves apart, and that helped create this culture in the community that people were attracted to.
That's a really great example. Do you remember they also did one called Ride Up Front, or like where they were trying to get you to ride up front with the driver? And I
Oh
remember
yeah,
that was an actual Lyft like ad campaign or whatever it might have been, where they were
right.
promoting, and that promotion was just promoting community. And I don't drive, believe it or not, in LA.
Yeah,
Um, I believe it or not, it's crazy to say that. But I used a lot of Ubers and Lyfts, and Uber to me is like the modern day taxi. It's a no thrills kind of deal. You jump in the car, you go, you don't really talk to your driver, maybe you do. Lyft, on the other hand, gave me that community feel.
right,
Kind of like a good example, in my opinion, when it comes to the streaming platforms, is Twitch is very much community focused because they have their TwitchCon, which I've been to, and I've never seen such an awesome community built together. And they do things to kind of promote that. Now, YouTube, on the other hand, has a community, but it's so big and broad and kind of like out there that I don't see it the focus part of a YouTube community. It's
right,
kind of like very individual, where Twitch is like we're all on Twitch together. We're all streaming together. I get that kind of, so it's like kind of Lyft versus Uber, but in this case Twitch is Lyft, as big as they are,
right.
and YouTube is Uber, right? And
Yeah,
that's kind of like how I describe that. But great example of Lyft as how they create rituals in communities.
yeah,
I really like that.
yeah.
Someone said the Cannabis app is pretty lit. Just made a profile. I have to do that too. Uber is
Thanks,
going to
guys.
replace human drivers with autonomous as soon as they can. Of course they are. I agree. I'm still waiting for Twitch to apply to be a Biff affiliate. And then hey, Retro Game Brews, good to see you. And then finally, let's close out this kind of interesting list, which I think was very helpful to kind of help us break down pieces of how you set up communities. Uh,
Yeah,
Prioritize effective communication. Absolutely. In gaming, what that's Discord to me. That's having a social media presence and interacting with people when they're talking to you. Like, for instance, a good example recently is Fall Guys' Twitter account is hilarious. And the way they interact with their community already is really great. And I'm already seeing an effective community by valuing the use of your social media, your Discord, and building that. And then number 10, make smart decisions. Well, I think that's just for life, right? I mean, we should all, that's, I don't know about that one being, come on.
yeah,
That's just a general yes. When you're in communities, I guess it's a good point though. If you're in a community, make smart decisions, right? Um,
sure.
and I wanted to jump into a couple of things. I was just looking, what are the, and can I tell you something? When I was doing research, Sam, about like, what are the best communities ever in gaming, right? All the YouTube videos that would pop up were all most toxic communities in gaming, top 10 most toxic. It was all toxic focused when I searched for best communities, Sam. What does that tell you off the bat? When I'm trying to research on how positive communities are in gaming, when most of the time my search engine's telling me about the negative. Like, for instance, I pulled up this, what are the 12 most
Leagues.
toxic communities? So does that
Yeah.
tell you that gaming has always kind of leaned towards toxicity when it comes to communities, and that the positive ones kind of sit in the back and people don't notice them? That I just wanted to get your feel on that kind of perspective.
Yeah, I mean, I think broadly speaking, people generally, you know, you're going to complain and kind of cite the negatives on something more often than you're going to say something positive about something. So I think there's probably elements of that, right? Just and that is going to drive behavior in terms of writing these lists or whatever. And people, you know, you're I don't know, people are familiar with some of these things, right? So it's like League of Legends, it's the toxicity in the chat, and there's been
Probably one of the
interesting
most
stuff.
toxic games in existence.
Yeah,
Toxic communities in existence, honestly.
and they've done some interesting stuff. I unfortunately don't know a ton about it, but I know that they have done some really interesting stuff over the years to try to mitigate that.
No, and
And
I'm not putting aside that there isn't positive sides of League of Legends, but for
yeah,
the most part, from what it's been known over the years, and even when I used to play it back in the day, it's skewed to toxicity. Um,
right. Yeah, it's an interesting. It's funny you asked this question because my wife asked me basically the same question last night. She's like, and she's not a gamer, but she's like, "Hey, I feel like all I hear about is like negative gaming communities. Are there any
Interesting.
positive gaming communities out there?" And I was like, "That's an interesting question."
Well, that goes to
Yeah,
show you that mainstream is skewed to think that a lot of gamers are toxic. Like, listen, these games I'm pulling up right now are your first person competitive shooters that people are just screaming on mics. Genzo says, I think the current community was built on the 90s and early 2000s trash talk gaming culture, which stemmed from toxicity and boys club. You're right. We come from a history of toxicity in our normal communities. Now, here's a good one, and I had an experience with Dota 2, Sam. So I played League of Legends for a long time. And about a year ago, I was so bored. You ever been in those lulls where you can't find a game to kind of keep you busy? It's like, oh man, no, this game sucks. I can't,
sure.
not hooked. And I'm like, maybe I'll try to get into Dota. I immediately did my first match, and I didn't technically know exactly what I was doing, but I do know MOBAs, and everyone in the chat was saying really, really mean things to me. You're like, you noob, get the hell out of here, get the F out of here, you did
Yeah,
this. I saw N words, dude, and I'm like, whoa, I'm just like new. Is there anyone in this game that would be like, hey man, maybe you should not jump into the game right away. Check out some of the tutorials instead of like coming at me and make me feel like a terrible person. Sam, what do you think of like that? That kind of explains like a League of Legends Dota community, right? Even in the chat of the game is toxic.
right.
And that's sad sometimes.
Yeah, I think it's a challenge with competitive games in particular. I play Overwatch,
Here's
and so
Overwatch.
yeah, it can be pretty frustrating. You know, when you're playing Overwatch and people don't know how to play characters or whatever. And so I'll admit, I've been one of those people in voice chat being like, why the hell are you playing Junkrat if you don't know how to play Junkrat, you know, or
Sure.
whatever. So, like, I think it's a challenge. I think those games, if they, you know, in an ideal world, they would try to find a way to match people together, or at least kind of try to do a better job of onboarding and kind of teaching you these things. I think, frankly, that a lot of these games don't do a great job. It's not like Overwatch, when you load it up, is like, all right, here's how this works. This is a game of rock paper scissors,
Yeah.
basically, and here's this character, you know, counters this character, and so on and so forth. You have to figure that out, you know. In some cases, really, you can only figure out some of that stuff unless you watch pro matches, and you can kind of understand how these strategies and like synergies, when used together, actually make something amazing happen. So yeah, I think it's an interesting challenge with these super competitive games, to how do you
How do you,
like
yeah.
mix your community together in a way that obviously makes gaming possible. Like, obviously it would suck if you separated out your community and it made it like harder to get matches or whatever. I'm sure there's like a lot of implications in terms of if you made changes, what would happen. But yeah, I feel like these games need to do a little bit better of a job of kind of mixing in people so that you're not just throwing in the noobs in with people. Like in my case, I've been playing Overwatch since beta, so it's like I get really annoyed when people ask this or like don't seem to understand some sort of fundamentals, and maybe they could do a better job of like sorting the community in a way. I don't know.
Yeah, and I'm noticing that on this list, which I think was really interesting, they pulled up a lot of chats and what you would see in chat. And for instance, I pulled up World of Tanks, and I don't need to read this out loud, but the stuff it says to these people, like it's
Yeah,
just awful. And you know what? In an era of mental health awareness, even more so with people being locked away, like
Sure.
I feel like you're right. I think the problem with gaming communities where the toxicity lies is competitive. And I think that goes with anything though. It's there's always toxicity when there's competition. Like even on the surface of sports, you see athletes fight each other. So in a sense, when like a pitcher throws a ball at a batter on purpose and then they rush the mound, that's very similar in a lot of sense to someone like calling you out in chat and being really mean to you and like in just a gaming sort of way. Now, of course, this is the negative side. There is an amazing and beautiful positive side too. And I found a list that said the best gaming communities based on video games that we're playing right now. Obviously, Animal Crossing is an example of a
Yeah.
positive community that we could all stand behind. And how to have toxicity in this is really few and far between. Let me check some chat. So there will always be toxicity in gaming. It just stems from shitty people, and shitty people are never going away. The challenge for sure, but to a degree, they need to have more casual rooms, channels, play lanes. Sure. How can I think a competitive community has to figure out how do they make more casual versions? And a good example, in my opinion, Fortnite has creative mode, just like Minecraft has creative mode options, and I think those are options for positivity and growth. Um, Sure, Animal Crossing can get savage. I know. Call of Duty Warzone's on this list, believe it or not. I don't know if that's you know, I've been seeing tons of streams of Warzone. I'm sure there's toxicity, but I have been seeing a lot of positivity around the game. It's been very popular. Call of Duty's had some really bad problems over the last few years. Hasn't really caught its stride, and now it seems with Warzone it has. Now Minecraft could go both ways, right? Minecraft could be both toxic as hell or a beautiful community, and I'm gonna get into that in a second because I baited Minecraft and I was a part of a community during the beta days of Minecraft that I'll never forget, and it really hit home for me. And I'll talk about that in a second. Obviously, Pokemon is a great community. I mean, come on. I mean, there's toxic people, but I would think that when you think of Pokemon, it's positive. You meet for raids and Pokemon Go outside. I mean, I don't know if people are still doing it with COVID. I'm sure they are. But you know that has always been a game that brings people together. Now they have Overwatch on here. Sam, would you say that there is a positive side to Overwatch's community, and it's
Oh
not?
yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, it's not all negative for sure. Yeah, I think a lot of these you're saying there's a culture around the community that is a lot much more collaborative.
Exactly.
So yeah, people are like you were making the difference of like competitive versus these others, and yeah, I think in a lot of those cases that you're showing, people are working like collaboratively to do something together to like have fun or whatever, and so I think that probably lends to a more positive community.
Yeah, so Sam, I'm gonna just show a real short clip from a TED Talk from AC Williams. He's a Nintendo ambassador and he helps their Splatoon esports community, believe it or not. And he references here how I believe one of their members got sick, and he kind of explains the outpour of love the community supported through social media. You might not hear this, so that's why I gave you the upfront. But I will send you the link right now, you know,
Cool, no worries.
in Discord. But I will recap it too. But I just want to play a short clip.
Community
Cool.
created messages and poems. Everyone reached out to show their love and support for Poco. I don't know who started it, but all of a sudden, the most incredible thing began happening. Everyone, and I mean everyone, began adding 2 hearts to their username in Poco's favorite colors.
So
Green
Poco
and
got
purple.
sick, and they
These
were a
hearts
famous
flooded
esport
Twitter and community timelines.
Splatoon person.
It's impossible for Poco to miss how loved she was.
So what AC was saying is that the community out of nowhere outpoured on social media, putting 2 hearts next to their names on Twitter to support this person, and the outcry was so strong that there was just no way that this wonderful person could not see the love that their community was giving. Now, can this give you a negative reaction? Can you be attacked on social media? We've seen that recently in gaming. There has been a little bit of a Me Too movement. There's been a bunch of stuff, but there is positive sides and support that shows that togetherness and social media can really help someone that's sick feel the special love they need when they're going through these hard times. So, Sam, can you just touch on how important social media can be on a positive light for a community?
Yeah, I mean, if you rewind back, 15 years or so, most of, most communities, when you would say community in gaming community, you would think of forums. And so forums kind of lended themselves to kind of certain community people or whatever. They were like, if you were on the forum, you had to kind of buy into, or not buy in, but you just had to kind of be ready to use a forum. You had to know how to use a forum. You had to, there's all these kind of barriers to entry or whatever, where, or just how people used forums. And then you kind of go to now, which with social media, and really, I think what changed it in a big way was Twitter back in 2008, 2009. Things really started changing, and the gaming industry started getting on Twitter in 2009, I'd say. And yeah, things started changing where you could get access to people's thoughts and opinions like anytime. And that's good and bad. Obviously, it's bad because people are just, throwing stuff at you all the time. But it's good because you can hopefully tap into a much broader selection of the community and really get a feel for what all sorts of people are what their opinions are, what they're dealing with, or whatever. And so for me, that and I actually started my career right around then. That's actually how I kind of made my mark in the video game industry back in 2009. Was I started a web page that was just a list of people in video games that were on Twitter, because that was like pretty novel. Yeah.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, it was a weird thing. I made a blog post, and I had some friends that followed me on Twitter that worked in the press. But either way, within a couple of days, it was like on G4 TV. They were like, "Here's this gaming industry list of people on Twitter." So that was pretty crazy because it was just a blog post. But it, but I was so excited about it at the time, and I was being an evangelist for Twitter in the sense because I was so excited that you could just tap into people's thoughts and see what people are saying about your game now, where before you would just see whatever people are saying within your forum, right? Or maybe you went out to some fan sites or whatever. But now you can kind of go all over the internet and see what people are saying, and you can kind of interact where they are. So that was when I was suggesting that we talk about community, that's been kind of the interesting thing. One of the interesting things to me, and a challenge to me also as a community person, is kind of staying up with what is the technology that people are using, right? So like, I heard about a year or two ago, I wasn't super active on Discord. I had a Discord, and I was, and I was on servers and whatever. But now Discord is a much bigger part of like my community work, I guess you could say, than it was before. And that's because, new platforms come out and they kind of get different audiences, and you get a really good feel for like how people use this stuff. For example, 10 years ago, Reddit was around, but it wasn't as huge as it would be just a few years later. So all these things kind of impact how people do their work, right? Like 15 years ago, you would have your website for your game, and that was where your news would come out from. You'd publish your developer diaries and so on and so forth. And now you might post elements of that in a YouTube video. Like, for example, Overwatch, I really like their videos with Jeff Kaplan, where he's their game director, and he'll give 5-10 minutes or more, and he'll describe what they're talking about. That's a really interesting shift in terms of community communication, because one of the things that I like about how they do that is they're presenting to you the challenges that they're dealing with as a company, and trying to kind of describe to you why they chose the route that they took, right? So with Overwatch, it's a huge discussion around game balance. Like, is this character, Brigitte, is she overpowered because she has a stun and all this other stuff, crowd control, and no other characters have it? And there's all this discussion in the community, and it's really great to check out these videos with Jeff, and in some cases their blog posts or Reddit posts, and you can really get a better understanding of why they make these decisions. Because the challenge is when you're working at these companies, you want to make a decision and you want to put it out there, and you don't necessarily want to expose some of the elements of the decision-making process or whatever, because it opens it up to scrutiny.
Yeah.
And it opens it up to like a billion questions for, well, why didn't you do this? And why didn't you do that? And if you're not this is kind of the argument that I've been making for the last year or two at my places of employment, is you need to kind of open up a bit more like an Overwatch and explain to people the decision-making process. Because otherwise people are just going to think you're an idiot if you didn't mention this other solution, right? I think that's what often happens in gaming communities. If you go into any sort of Reddit thread or whatever, it's just like, these guys are idiots. They're just lazy. They don't know how to do this thing in video games. I see some of that in alt space. People try to say, things about the alt space developers being lazy or whatever. And it's like, no, guys, stuff is a lot more complicated than you think. It's very complicated to make video games. With Epic, they've got hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people working on those games. At Fortnite, they have people working around the clock. There's been articles about how working at Epic is not necessarily great because the expectations are so high that they're always producing content and producing it on a regular basis. So
yeah,
it's a whole nother can of worms in terms of like how business models are driving how these companies act.
Yeah, I think a good example of community kind of ruining a game, and I'm not saying it got ruined, okay? So, Sam, my first podcast was called the Destiny Podcast. We were one of the first vanilla Destiny the Game podcast. We focused on Destiny the Game. This is us. There's me on the couch. We're interviewing Dado, who actually is still pretty big streamer, but back then he was one of the big kind of like technical YouTubers for Destiny, where he would talk about like, why did Bungie upgrade this? And then we would talk with him. So Dado represented that community. But what Bungie was doing at the time in the early days of it was they were listening to the Reddit. And they were like, the Destiny Reddit in the early days was so great. There were so many great things about it. But then it started kind of turning to complaining, and then Bungie trying to keep up with the complaining and affecting the game and changing the game because the community was outcrying too much. Now, Sam, in my opinion, the developers have to put their foot down a little bit and not take in all and try to appease everyone, because it could really ruin the game. So in my opinion, when Destiny 2 came out, as a person that podcasted for Destiny, as a person that spent 4 years talking about this game, we were nonstop talking about Destiny. Right. I got to the point where it's like, I can't do this game anymore. It's changed. It's not the game I remember. But man, this was like our community. And I went on Reddit and said to everyone, listen, we are no longer going to do a Destiny podcast because we are no longer playing this game. And I just want to be transparent. We can't dial it in anymore for you guys. We just want to be honest with you that we're moving on and we're going to have to end this podcast. Sam, I had to end my own podcast because I felt like this game just didn't fit the love and the community that it once had. And not to say that Destiny didn't pick things up and get better. They've become their own publisher now, Bungie, which I think is great for them. They're not under the Activision kind of like umbrella.
Right.
They got their own things they can do. But can I ever go back to Destiny, Sam, after spending 4 years of my hard-earned voice talking about this game and then watching it kind of change in a direction that I didn't feel like? I was like, wait, what are you guys doing? Vanilla Destiny's fine. Wait, whoa. Hey, wait, what are you doing to this? Wait, what? That was my experience with Destiny for 4 years. Wait, what? No. Oh, God damn it. No, wait. Oh, great. Oh, wait. That's not how I want to feel. And unfortunately, there's a side to communities that you got to put your foot down. You can't just listen to them and take everything. You got to be strong and stick to what you made, what you believe in. The Sonic trailer is a good example of this, right? The outcry for the Sonic trailer that changed the way Sonic looked was so strong that they had to go back and redo everything. Now, as someone from the entertainment industry, I would have said, you guys didn't have to do that. This was your movie. This was your reimagine of Sonic. It might not have looked right, but they could have definitely put their foot down and went with the way it looked. But they let the outcry of the fan base change their decisions. And I don't always think that's a positive thing. In the Sonic experience, it was kind of, but I think that there's a line that you have to kind of just say, hey, community, we're going to listen to you, but we just can't do everything, you know? And I think that's the problem.
Yeah.
That's a problem.
Yeah. It's really hard to navigate that because yeah, you have to, in my opinion, it's about setting expectations. Right? Like if I'm talking to you about my house and needing to improve it or whatever, and you just come up to me and you're like, why don't you just burn down the whole house and build a whole new house? And it's like, that's not really the discussion that we were having. We were talking about like making some small improvements or whatever. And that's kind of with the community, people will come up with all sorts of suggestions and of varying degrees of good or greatness or whatever, the quality of those ideas. And so, yeah, I think it's best if you can to try to set expectations in some conversations or whatever, or even just kind of frame things and be like, all right, everyone, this is the specific problem or set of problems that we're looking to handle, and we would love your feedback on that. It's really crucial that, like you said, that these companies and these teams have some sort of focus and have some sort of vision in mind, because not just does it benefit the gaming community or the video gamer, but it also benefits the teams internally. It's really hard when you're working on a project or working for a company and you don't really understand where things are headed. Right. And I've worked at a bunch of different companies and startups and whatever, and one of those common like problems that can happen is just a lack of focus and a lack of focusing on particular problems and really trying to nail it. And I think people really struggle when they're kind of floundering and trying to like figure out what to do, and maybe they change this thing a little bit over here and change this thing over a little bit over there, because they're kind of like trying to find what is that thing that they need to do. Where rather if you have like a product vision and you have like a goal in mind, and maybe you can work within that, rather than just taking any old feedback from anywhere and kind of doing things piecemeal.
So those are great insights, Sam. Genzo said to the Sonic thing, they would have been the new Super Mario Brothers movie if they didn't course correct. Biff says, I think I'd like to see the CGI movie Cats, the version with the digital buttholes in it. Oh yes, there is a version, and someone had to edit them all out of the release.
Yeah, the butthole cut.
So I do agree, Genzo, that in the Sonic's case, it actually did help the movie for sure. But again, like to Biff's point, it's like here they are going back and removing buttholes from a movie that they're like, these animals have buttholes, so they should be on their costumes. Like I think that it's unprecedented in our time, because when I was growing up in the 90s, you might have been able to complain on a discussion board, but you couldn't like get to the actual developer and be like, right, or like the company and be like, we hate this. Now today, I think that social media both helps and also destroys things. And that goes for communities, that goes for just anything, even sneaker companies and drink companies and food companies. One thing I want to point out is that one thing I love about Twitter is that it's super toxic, but one of the communities I'm a part of that I actually love is the retro gaming community. For instance, today is called Saturn Day, and that's when you post your Saturn images. Tomorrow, there's Game Boy Sunday. Monday is Mega Drive Monday. Tuesday is Atari Tuesday. Wednesday is When Nest Day. Thursday is like Throwback Thursday. Friday is NES Friday. That is community building through a social media app, through hashtagging and bringing people together. And I just love that a community like this can exist on Twitter. And Sam, I've seen very, very little toxicity in the retro gaming community on Twitter. So I did want to say that this is a community that I'm a part of. And if you're interested in the retro games, you should check out a lot of like the cool people that are in this space. And that being said, Sam, we are coming to a close here. And I just kind of want to do like A little bit of a conclusion and an overall thought, and I'll let you start. And I want you to just kind of give us, like, what do you think communities of the future are going to look like in especially the gaming industry? Are we moving to a positive way, or are we still kind of waving our way into the mainstream culture? What is your final thought on all that?
Oh, that's a good question. I think communities are just gonna, obviously they're gonna continue to evolve. I think right now what people are starting to think about and really try to tackle, there's some fundamental challenges with running a community. One of which we've just been talking about basically, which is collecting feedback from everyone and really trying to decipher, like, am I listening to the right people? Who am I listening to? Yes, I'm getting these tweets or these Discord messages or whatever. Who are these people? And then there's also some really interesting innovation in terms of bringing people together. Prior to COVID, there was a shift, and I was really excited about this. Personally, was doing work in my career around it, around building meetup groups around the world. So I think there's going to be a really interesting shift, post COVID. I think there will be a really interesting shift towards building local communities. GameStop was in the process of pivoting in that direction, where they were going to redesign all GameStop locations to be basically like PC and console gaming hubs where you could go and play, some Overwatch and maybe watch an Overwatch League match and whatever. So there's going to be really some really interesting innovations and exciting developments, I think, again, post COVID, on this front in terms of building real life communities. How can we take and bring people together from the online into the offline and maybe build even better connections? It's harder to be a jerk in person than it is on the internet, right? Someone's not going to just pop up into your face and be like, Andy, you're a dickhead, and just like go crazy.
No.
Like, it's going to be a little bit different.
Yeah.
And so I think that could be good too. And yeah, I mean, and then with COVID, I think it's a really interesting time where I think my hope is that, we're only a few months into this thing, and we're probably going to be another year into this thing before we're really on the other side of it. And so it's going to be really interesting to note, how does this change how people interact with one another? Is it gonna, I hope that it makes people a little bit more open to sharing their struggles that they have, right? Like, I struggle with this myself. Like, life in general, in my opinion, is kind of depressing right now.
Sure.
And so like when you're working or whatever, how do you say to your boss, like, oh, I'm just not having a great day because I'm like bummed out? That's not a conversation that I would traditionally have, at least in the United States. We don't have like a level of discussion around those sorts of things yet. So I hope all these kind of things come together to making us more empathetic towards others, that we find better ways to bring people together. We find ways to bring together online with things like Zoom, or maybe it's Discord or whatever, where we can like simulate what we are doing offline. We can do that online. And then similarly, that we can bring our communities from the online world to the offline world to build even better connections and deeper connections between each other.
I think you're absolutely right. And I think that what's been amazing is there's companies like Zoom that were creating these like digital conferences, digital softwares where you could do stuff from remote, and now it's becoming a necessity. So all these software companies are bringing this technology faster to the public, where they were developing it as startups. Believe it or not, Sam, when I was doing cryptocurrency podcasting, I was using Zoom like 2 to 3 years ago. And I would always be like, I knew what Zoom was, but probably most people had no idea what Zoom was. And then March comes along, where there might have been like, 10% of people have heard of Zoom. Now I'd say 90% of people in the United States, or maybe more, know what Zoom is, or at least have heard of it. And that is unprecedented. And I agree, we need to see more ability to meet in a digital space that simulates the way we talked. One example I saw was conferencing software where there were circles, and you could see the other circles, and you could literally take yourself and jump your cam to the next circle, just like you would be in a room where there's people standing around. And I thought that was a clever technology, and we're going to see more of that. And I was showing clips from WonderCon and cosplay because this is something that's unfortunately, the event. And that is what you
Right.
need for community. And these poor cosplayers cannot do what they love the most, and that's going to these events, building their communities, because there's one community that's super strong, and that's cosplay in the gaming comic space and
Right.
stuff like that. And it's a shame that what do they do in a digital sense? What do they do? They'll stream and stuff like that, but this is a community that's hurting right now because of COVID. And I hope to see, like you said, we're gonna get through this. We're gonna be more resilient. And by the way, all these costumes are fantastic. And
Yeah.
and I actually went to WonderCon 2 years ago, and it's a shame that I couldn't go to like TwitchCon this year, which should have been coming up in September. I couldn't go to Comic-Con. I couldn't go to all these events that I love so much. But that being said, I'm hopeful for the future of
Yeah.
of communities in gaming. I'm hopeful for just everything being positive, because maybe because of we've been all locked down, that it's going to bring us a little bit closer together. And gaming has helped a lot. Believe it or not, gaming has helped people talk to their friends. Gaming has helped people play with their friends. Also, just do something at home. I know people are playing Animal Crossing that never played Animal Crossing before.
Right. Yeah.
But hey, Sam, do you want to share your social, or
Sure.
just let us know where you can find you?
Yeah, I'm at Sam Houston, Houston like the city in Texas. So yeah, just at Sam Houston on Twitter, and you can find me elsewhere. If you want to check out the Cannabis Social Network that I mentioned earlier, it's like a
Yeah.
competitor to Instagram. Basically, Instagram isn't super cool with cannabis content. So about a year and a half ago, we launched Cannabis. So we're about 27,000 people posting cannabis content. So just search Cannabis on the App Store, Google Play Store, or you can go to cannabis.app.
I'm downloading it right now because I'm a supporter of the cannabis industry, but there's things that I can't share on my personal socials. So maybe I can make an account, not a burner account, but some kind of account where I feel safe to post my love of cannabis on your app. So, dude, I'm downloading this right away. So,
Cool.
and if you're watching the VOD, thanks for staying through the whole thing, and check out Cannabis. Sam, it was a
Thanks.
pleasure. First of all, we met in Altspace VR, and I put on an event called Video Game Chat in there. I know that a lot of people can check it out. I actually do have it on my panels, I think, or maybe I don't, but I'll put it up because I changed the link. So,
Oh yeah, it's right there. I think great on the
Oh.
right hand side, or I don't know. Or yeah, you use that
I have
image
to-
in Altspace.
Yes, I have to update. Oh yeah, I am over here. Yeah, that's Max Headroom from the famous show.
Yeah.
But I love doing the event because I'm contributing to that community too. I think in a positive way, because that is what I love to do. Is I like to build communities. So I think that this was a great episode. Thanks everyone, Fred, Biff, and Genzo, and I saw Retro Game Brews. I saw a few other people and Stash. Thanks for stopping by the show today, and I will get the VOD up, Sam, and we kind of just blast things over the weekend. I'm really excited that this was a very good episode, in my opinion. This was an episode where we can really dig into the deep seeds of how community and gaming has evolved or not evolved, and I think that we covered a lot of bases. I'm happy to have you, man. I'm sure we're gonna continue to talk off this. We're gonna raid someone.
All right.
Let's see, a friend of mine that I met. This is Rachel. Let's all stop by and give her a hello and some support. Sam, enjoy your weekend, sir.
Thanks, man. You too.
And thanks so much for joining the cafe. By the way, morning podcast so early. And I'm sure we'll have you on again. And then everyone that watched the live stream, thank you so much. And we'll be back next Saturday. We have another guest. We're going to be jumping into the retro collecting community. And I'll make an announcement next Wednesday. I'm excited about that. Until then, stay safe, wash your hands, check out Umbrella Academy if you like that kind of thing. Take care.